I can only tell you that in business world, and in some way, when Sanvid invited me, he's talking about the role of media in some way evangelizing the good practices or highlighting the lack of practices in in the operations of some of the large corporations that have a serious impact on environment and the communities that they operate with. So I can only tell you two things that we are doing at Business World. One, we are launching something called bwsustainability.com. So we believe that sustainability, like Guardian, is a sustainability platform, because in the main product, while we while we put occasionally some content that is relevant to what we are discussing today, it is something that we don't deep dive in. Second is also within the main magazine, we now dedicate about 4 to 6 pages to sustainability. We have a new sustainability editor. He joins in a month or so. So really, from a business world commitment to sustainability and bringing out the good work that companies are doing, and to highlight also where there are lack of these practices, we at Business World will devote more space and more attention to these issues. However, when I was coming today to the session and I was preparing, I said today the idea seems to understand how to assess and mitigate the negative social impact and risks related to large infrastructure development projects, and suggest ways in which companies can be more socially responsible while balancing costs and profits. But I can tell you that, more companies are sensitive and are doing work, but most of these companies do so-called sustainable practices as really a hogwash or a compliance thing. It's a tick mark. It's not really a deep dive. And really we are talking of sustainability and CSR and social impact. But one company has been doing it for more than 50 years. It's Tata's. I mean, what is Jamshedpur? That is the best example of serving a community, of having sustainable practices. And, that was done 50 plus years back. So really, I believe that most companies don't practice what they preach in entirety. They don't practice it as a way of life. But as today's presentation shows, there are companies that are very serious about it. So also, we are discussing this issue when there is a serious debate going on, an issue called land acquisition, which has raised controversy on what is the role of development in the lives of villagers, communities, and the related social impact investment and assessment that needs to be taken into account when you move forward. Also, how can companies, government, and other stakeholders consider the approval and integration of communities affected by such projects in a deep dive manner, be it mining, roads, highways, industrial developments, etc. Also, doing what you do and doing what you do, Jane, involves building consensus. And building consensus in communities sometimes takes time and is difficult, and it comes with things that are politicized or misused. So how do you allay fears? How do you make sure that the community that you impact, I know that your company has an impact on Rajasthan in more ways than one, and you're doing some things to in some way contribute meaningfully. But how do you really become part of the local governance structure there? And also, how do corporates as well as government balance development with socially responsible practice? How can they give back to societies and communities? What are the best practices they can adopt? How can technology help? These are the questions. And as I said, I'm not an expert in sustainability, but I'd like to raise these questions. While talking of innovation, of course, innovation in any domain is key. How do you maximize the use of natural resources, for example, with minimum damage to environment or without upsetting the communities that are part of the ecological setup? How can you give back what we have taken away from the environment and from the people impacted? And I was just writing down something. It was my elder sister's birthday 2 days back. And I was just thinking and I was writing. When I was younger, she's about 4.5 years older than me. And my parents would give me her sweaters, those are very girly kind of colors. But I was small, really not that sensitive to color. It may sound very trivial and small, but in some way, recycling of clothes were the sustainable practices that my parents followed. My dad studied at BITS Pilani, and he chose to be a professor of chemistry. And he used to go on a bicycle to his college. He was the principal of the college. And me and my sister, I was probably 10 years old, and my sister was about 14 and a half, 15. And we would tell our dad, that why do you go on a cycle? There's a car. And he used to say, it's healthy for me. What's your problem? Plus, it's good for environment. My dad used to say that, 20, 30 years back, more than 30 years back. So, I think while we talk of CSR and sustainable practices becoming really a part of the strategy and not just a compliance issue, I think it has to come from the leaders that champion these. And I want to talk about two individuals that I met over the last 20 odd months who in some way believe that the role of businesses is to be a force for good than just maximizing profits. And if you are a force for good, then profits will come by. And, one is a guy called, his name is Sibezama. He's a Dutch guy. He runs a company called DSM, which is a Dutch nutrition company. And I have had conversations with him over dinner. And again, what they are doing in terms of helping the communities that they have impacted in terms of their nutrition. They work in the area of nutrition, and I'm again not an expert in health, but I understand that malnutrition is a big issue. I understand, hygiene around food and what goes into the stomach is a big issue. So they're trying to do things in that domain. Second is a gentleman who runs Unilever and is Paul Polman. In my conversations with him, I realized that Unilever, while Unilever keeps winning awards at Cannes in terms of what it's doing with communities, in terms of communication, there's a lot that they are doing in terms of actually making a difference on the ground, because they believe in a deep dive manner. And these are two companies that I have interacted at the highest level, and I have had some conversations that they need to really, in some way, offset the impact they have by doing some of the things they do as a large corporate. So finally, how do you develop strategies, not immediate gains, or not just meeting short-term objectives, but deep dive strategies, and I keep using the word deep dive, to foster responsible and sustainable business / innovative sustainable practices? How do you carry communities along by ensuring they're partners in reaping long-term benefits of development, genuinely impacting their lives in a way that you provide them livelihood and a reason for being? Also by co-opting them through programs that give back and some sort of ROI. Like I said, better education for the children, gainful employment, very importantly, cleaner air, more water, sustainable agriculture. And I just want to say that I believe, and at Businessworld we believe, that we need to measure the practices in some way, and in that way encourage the good practices, and in some way bring out the aspects that are not so healthy. So you will see in Businessworld we'll do more coverage of sustainable practices, and we've embarked on a study which that hopefully will be out in the next 45-60 days of looking at, in the last 1 year, more than 1 year, it's been more than a year, when the CSR bill was passed, have the companies really upped their investments in initiatives, not just investments, but even without upping the amounts that they've invested, have they really in a deep dive manner done what they're supposed to do, or what the objectives of the CSR bill espouse?